Tonight we're going to be reading the Gosho, The Four Debts of Gratitude. It's actually on page 41 of volume 1 of the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Now for everybody that doesn't have one of these, understand that it might get a little confusing to find this material, and I actually am specifically speaking to Rekha Rajani. I assume a friend of ours from India. He's asked you for a connection on how to whatever. Okay, so something has happened in the last 6 months, I guess it was. How long ago was it when you called, you freaked out and said, "Oh, it's all gone"? At any rate, the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin and all the study material that used to be on the sgi.org website has been moved, okay? And it was moved specifically for the purpose of making it independently available to all people rather than it being under the umbrella of something that's SGI focused. So the SGI library is now a separate website from SGI. So if you go to sgi.org in Japan, you might freak out and say, "Oh, what happened to all the Gosho? What happened?" No, they did not do away with it. They did not take it private. They're not trying to make you have to buy anything. The key is that they've made it available so that on a more scholarly basis, on a more general basis, President Ikeda's wisdom must understand that there are people like us doing what we're doing here, because this is not an SGI activity. These get-togethers that we have every Wednesday. So if you'll just Google Nichiren Library or go to www.nichirenlibrary.org, I believe is what it's under, you can find all of the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1, Volume 2. You still find the same 4 big materials that were there. Volume 1, Volume 2, the dictionary, which is necessary for you to really, if you want to understand certain things on your own, you need to have that. And also the orally transmitted teachings. So all 4 of those books are available free online. And you don't have to have a physical copy in order to read that or to follow that as we read along and read the Gosho. Now when you get into the individual lectures though, again, these aren't my lectures. I'm just reading lectures from Daisaku Ikeda. These are for sale. They seem to be around $8 US. I saw them, you can get them, basically since they're English versions, you can get them on the SGI USA website. You have to look a little bit. It's not really that easy to find the bookstore and to locate them. And if anybody that's in India or far away, needs me to, I will obtain them for you and then forward them to you. If you're actually following us over the web on these videos that we're doing now that we're recording our meetings, I will go out of my way to try and make sure that you have the ability to follow with that material. So again, right now we're reading from still Volume 3 of Teachings for Victory. But after this, instead of going to Volume 4, which I'm obtaining, we're actually going to reread, this group is rereading it, but we're going to read it so that it's online, or so that there's a, again, I could drop dead tomorrow. This is important. It's the truth. This is an important thing for me to share, again. So I'm going to reread this. So most of the people at this table already have this. Anik, you don't. I'm getting you one. I'm getting 3 extra copies of this. I'm getting 10 copies of 4. That should be enough to cover what I know is an immediate need. Okay? But by all means, do understand that if you need me to help in any way that I can, I will do that. And we are going to be having to send away, and they're going to have to be, they don't deliver to our country, so it has to go to a friend. It doesn't. The pull down on SGI USA, it doesn't have our country named. No. We don't live in the country that it has named. So I'm going to have it go to a friend who's local in California and then have them all sent. So I can have pretty much everything sent and then redistribute it from here for those of you in the world that somehow found this group and you're watching and you're listening, and I appreciate that. Tonight, the 4 debts of gratitude on page 41. Don't forget that we already have on the video, we already read On Repaying Debts of Gratitude, which is one of his 5 major writings. If you remember this colored book of me holding it up from past weeks or months, you'll find it there. It's on page 221. And this is a letter about, Dozenbo, his mentor or his teacher, having died. This particular gosho touches on things a little differently. So I'm going to go ahead and then read from the dictionary to give you the dictionary definition of the 4 debts of gratitude. Because normally when we think of the debts of gratitude from Nichiren's writings, we think of the major writing of On Repaying Debts of Gratitude, and there's parent, teacher, and sovereign, right? We're always talking about parent, teacher, and sovereign. The 4 debts of gratitude on page 215 of the Buddhist dictionary, it says, the debts owed to one's parents, to all living beings, to one's sovereign, and to the 3 treasures of Buddhism. These 4 are set forth in the contemplation of the Mind Ground Sutra. The definition of the 4 debts of gratitude varies somewhat according to the source. The Meditation on the Correct Teaching Sutra defines them as the debts owed to one's father, to one's mother, to the thus come one or Buddha, and to the teacher of the law. In his work on the 4 debts of gratitude, which I'm going to read to you in a minute, Nichiren refers to the 4 debts of gratitude described in the Contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra. On Repaying Debts of Gratitude, he lists the 4 debts of gratitude as debts owed to one's father and mother as one aspect, to one's teacher, to the 3 treasures, and to one's sovereign. Okay, so I did that too. Why do I have this marked? It's for something else. Okay, so, and do again, understand the next thing we're going to read is actually this. So, going on to the 4 debts of gratitude from volume 1 of Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, starting on page 41. I'll skip over to the background like we always do, get a little understanding of where we're headed with this. Everything's cool, right? Okay, here we go. Background, page 46 actually. Nichiren Daishonin wrote this letter while he was in exile in Ito on the Izu Peninsula. It was addressed to Kudo Sakonojo Yoshitaka, known also as Kudo Yoshitaka, the Lord of Amatsu in Awa Province. Kudo Yoshitaka is said to have converted to Nichiren Daishonin's teachings around 1256, about the same time Shijo Kingo and Ikegami Muenga first did. A few years after Daishonin first proclaimed his teachings. So this is a very early gosho. You can see that it's a very early gosho because it's at the beginning of volume 1. Okay. Now, as such, then, and it pertains to the time around the Izu exile. Okay. So in the letter to Misawa, the Daishonin says, as for my teachings, regard those before my exile to the province of Sado as equivalent to the Buddha's pre-Lotus Sutra teachings. Why does he make that distinction? And as we read these goshos, you should always understand this. Is it before Sado Island or after Sado Island? Because you have to read it from the perspective of understanding what he says there in Letter to Misawa to understand why the tone changes. And why would you think that tone... What's the significance of that time before and after Sado?
After he already proved that he could not get killed.
Well, not only the spooky thing, but he had actually fulfilled what the Lotus Sutra said would happen to the votary. This Izu Peninsula exile is the first of it. He was supposed to be banished time and again. So the time and again aspect is he had to be banished at least twice in order to qualify to literally be the entity spoken of in the Lotus Sutra, right? So that's why he suddenly, when he had fulfilled all of the prophecies, that's when he started to declare more overtly his true identity. In these original teachings, after he had first, 1253, April 28, 1253, when he first chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that don't forget, he's saying here, this is only like a couple of years after that this letter was actually written. This encouragement was actually there. So do understand that he is in an evolutionary process of realizing his true identity. Okay, that's why in the opening the eyes he says, on that night the dude named Nichiren died. And it's right, exactly. So everybody with me? All right, so continuing with the background. While the Daishonin was in exile on Izu, Yokotaka sent him offerings and continued to maintain pure faith. He was killed. This is the guy that was killed defending the Daishonin at the time of the Komatsubara persecution. Remember, he was on his way to his house. This guy found out that he was being attacked, came to his aid. This is when Nichiren got his arm broken. Another fulfillment of the prophecies that were contained in the Lotus Sutra about the votary in the fifth 500-year period. Okay, so this guy that this Gojo is written to actually died trying to save Nichiren Daishonin's life later. Okay, so he's a very significant person just in that karmic relationship with the Gohonzon, with the law, with the teacher, the original teacher. He was killed defending the Daishonin at the time of the Komatsubara persecution on the 11th month of 1264. The Four Debts of Gratitude is the only letter still extant that the Daishonin addressed to him. In this letter, in light of the reason for his banishment, Nichiren Daishonin expresses his conviction that he is a true practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, that's what he's called. He mentions the two important matters that concern his Izu exile. He states, one is that I feel immense joy, and explains the reasons for his joy, and the greater part of the letter consists of this explanation. Following this, he states the second of the two important matters is that I feel intense grief. Citing passages from the Lotus and Great Collection Sutras that reveal the gravity of the offense of slandering the law and its devotees, the Daishonin explains that he grieves at the thought of the great karmic retribution his tormentors must undergo. This is the concluding part of the letter. In the body of the letter, the Daishonin gives two reasons for his immense joy. One is that he has been able to prove himself to be the votary of the Lotus Sutra by fulfilling the Buddhist prediction made in the sutra that his votary in the latter day of the law will meet with persecution. Okay, but all those specific persecutions haven't ultimately all been fulfilled yet. The other reason is that by suffering banishment for the sutra's sake, he can repay the four debts of gratitude. He declares that the ruler who condemned him to exile is the very person to whom he is most grateful, because that's what allows him to now fulfill the prophecies of the Lotus Sutra. Thanks to the ruler, it's just like when we meet great obstacles, we're fulfilling the prophecy of what it is to be the Buddha. That's the validation that we are who we're aspiring to be. Okay, it's only because of those circumstances that we have to overcome that we're able to bring out our true Buddha nature. He says, thanks to the ruler, he has been able to fulfill the words of the Lotus Sutra and so prove himself to be its true votary. Then the Daishonin stresses the importance of repaying the four debts of gratitude set forth in the contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra. The four debts of gratitude are the debts owed to all living beings, to one's father and mother, to one's sovereign, and to the three treasures, the Buddha, the law, and the Buddhist order. And President Ikeda will explain that a little more. Among these four debts of gratitude, the Daishonin places special emphasis on the debt owed to the three treasures, without which one could not attain Buddhahood. All right? And that will all be so beautifully clarified as usual by President Ikeda in the lecture as we get to it. So now, I'm going to start reading on page 41. Four debts of gratitude. Concerning my present exile, there are two important matters that I must mention. One is that I feel immense joy. The reason is that this world is called the Sahe world. Sahe meaning endurance. This is why the Buddha is also called the one who can endure. In the Sahe world, there are 1 billion Mount Sumerus, 1 billion suns and moons, and 1 billion groups of 4 continents. Among all these worlds, it was in the world at the center, with its Mount Sumeru, sun and moon, and the 4 continents, that the Buddha made his advent. Japan is a tiny island country situated in a remote corner of that world, to the northeast of that country in which the Buddha appeared. Talking about India. Since all the lands in the 10 directions, with the exception of the Sahe world, are pure lands, and again, understand this is to be considered like pre-Lotus Sutra kind of a teaching here, are pure lands, their people being gentle-hearted, neither abuse nor hate the worthies and sages. In contrast, this world is inhabited by people who were rejected from the pure lands in the 10 directions. They have committed the 10 evil acts or the 5 cardinal sins, slandered the worthies and sages, and have been unfilial to their mothers and fathers, or disrespectful to the monks. For these offenses they fell into the 3 evil paths, and only after dwelling there for countless kalpas were they reborn in this world. Yet the residue of the evil karma formed in their previous existences has not yet been eradicated, and they still tend to perpetuate the 10 evil acts or the 5 cardinal sins, to revile the worthies and sages, and to be undutiful to their fathers and mothers, or irreverent toward the monks. For these reasons, when the thus come one Shakyamuni made his advent in this world, some people offered him food into which they had mixed poison. Others tried to harm him by means of swords and staves, mad elephants, lions, fierce bulls, or savage dogs. Still others charged him with violating women, condemned him as a man of lowly status, or accused him of killing. Again, some, when they encountered him, covered their eyes to avoid seeing him, and others closed their doors and shuttered their windows. Still others reported to the kings and ministers that he held erroneous views and was given to slandering exalted personages. These incidents are described in the Great Collection Sutra, the Nirvana Sutra, and other scriptures. The Buddha was innocent of all such evil deeds, yet this world is particular or deficient in those who with bad karma are born into it and inhabit it in great numbers. Moreover, the devil king of the 6th heaven, scheming to prevent the people of this world from leaving it for the Pure Lands, seizes every opportunity to carry out his perverse acts. Okay, so everybody understood what that was saying, right? Mm-hmm. He's basically saying the Buddha Shakyamuni went through all kinds of bullshit too. Mm-hmm. All right? It appears that in his scheming, it appears that his scheming is ultimately intended to prevent the Buddha from expounding the Lotus Sutra. He's talking about the devil king, right? The reason is that the nature of this devil king is to rejoice at those who create the karma of the 3 evil paths, and to grieve at those who form the karma of the 3 good paths. Yet he does not lament so greatly over those who form the karma of the 3 good paths, but he sorrows indeed at those who aspire to the 3 vehicles, who aspire to attain Buddhahood. What are the 3 vehicles? Learning, realization, and bodhisattva. Again, he may not sorrow so much over those who seek to attain the 3 vehicles, but he grieves bitterly at those who form the karma to become Buddhas, and avails himself of every opportunity to obstruct them. In other words, there are going to be a lot of people that want to do that, but they're not going to be able to make it because it's so hard. He knows that those who hear even a single sentence or phrase of the Lotus Sutra will attain Buddhahood without fail, and exceedingly distressed by this, contrives various plots and restrains and persecutes believers in an attempt to make them abandon their faith. So when I talk about devilish functions, realize that Nichiren Daishonin is talking about them too, right now, as he experienced them, and as all of his disciples will also experience them. Although the age in which the Buddha lived was certainly a defiled one, the 5 impurities had only just begun to manifest themselves. In addition, the devil stood in awe of the Buddha's powers. Yet, even in a time when the people's greed, anger, foolishness, and false views were still not rampant, a group of Brahmins of the bamboo staff school killed the venerable Madhgalyayana, who was known as the foremost in transcendental powers, and King Ajatasattu, by releasing a mad elephant, threatened the life of the only one in the 3-fold world who is worthy of honor, Shakyamuni. Devadatta killed the nun Uttapavarna, who had attained the state of Arhat, and the venerable Kokolika spread evil rumors about Shariputra, who was renowned as the foremost in wisdom. These were all followers of the Buddha Shakyamuni, right? So everybody had life-threatening situations that they had to face and overcome in order to try to attain Buddhahood. How much worse will things become in the world as the 5 impurities steadily increased? And now, in the latter age, hatred and jealousy toward those who believe even slightly in the Lotus Sutra will be all the more terrible. Thus the Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? When I read this passage for the first time, I did not think that the situation would be as bad as it predicts. Now I am struck by the unfailing accuracy of the Buddha's words, especially in light of my present circumstances. And so, it all pertains to us as well. I, Nichiren, do not observe the precepts with my body. What's that mean? He doesn't live like a monk. He doesn't do all these purer than thou things that are like out of rote. Yeah, they're not real. The real point is to spread the law. Okay, there had been a bunch of rules that had been formulated over those couple thousand years. He says, I, Nichiren, do not observe the precepts with my body, nor is my heart free from the 3 poisons. So, is it any different than us? No. But since I believe in this Lotus Sutra myself and also enable others to form a relationship with it, like all of us, I had thought that perhaps society would treat me rather gently. We all thought we'd be, right? We'd be getting benefits. And we do. But we still have to face the difficulties that a Buddha has to face. Probably because the world has entered into the latter age, even monks who have wives and children have followers, as do the priests who eat fish and fowl. I have neither wife nor children, nor do I eat fish or fowl. I have been blamed merely for trying to propagate the Lotus Sutra. Though I have neither wife nor child, I am known throughout the country as a monk who transgresses the code of conduct. And though I have never killed even a single ant or mole cricket, my bad reputation is spread throughout the realm. This may well resemble the situation of Shakyamuni Buddha, who was slandered by a multitude of non-Buddhists during his lifetime. Okay? You understand what he's saying? He's saying there are a whole bunch of priests from a whole lot of different schools that are doing all the things that supposedly they shouldn't be doing as monks. Okay? It seems that, but not me. But I don't follow precepts. I'm not a member of any school. It seems that solely because my faith in the Lotus Sutra accords slightly more with its teachings, than does the faith of others, evil demons must have possessed their bodies and be causing them to feel hatred toward me. I am nothing but a lowly and ignorant monk without precepts. Yet when I think that such a person as myself should be mentioned in the Lotus Sutra, which was expounded more than 2,000 years ago, and that the Buddha prophesies that that person would encounter persecution, I cannot possibly express my joy. So in other words, when I realize I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do and I'm catching shit for it, it doesn't bum me out. It makes me really happy because it validates and proves to me that according to the teaching, I am practicing correctly.
Yes.
All right? It is already 24 or 25 years since I began studying Buddhism. Yet I have believed wholeheartedly in the Lotus Sutra only for the past 6 or 7 years. That means I didn't lay everything else aside until 6 or 7 years ago. All right? Moreover, although I had faith in the sutra because I was negligent and because my studies and the interruptions of mundane affairs, each day I would recite only a single scroll, a chapter, or the title. Now, however, for a period of more than 240 days from the 12th day of the 5th month of the last year to the 16th day of the 1st month of this year, I think I have practiced the Lotus Sutra 24 hours each day and night. I say so because having been exiled on the Lotus Sutra's account, I now read and practice it continuously, whether I am walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, because I'm living the teaching. Do you understand? For anyone born human, what greater joy could there be? It is the way of ordinary people that, even though they spur themselves on to arouse the aspiration for enlightenment and wish for happiness in the next life, they exert themselves no more than 1 or 2 out of all the hours of the day. And thus only after reminding ourselves to do so. We all know that, right? So he's acknowledging that's reality. As for myself, I read the Lotus Sutra without having to remember to, and practice it with even when I do not read its words out loud. Okay? During the course of countless kalpas, while transmigrating through the 6 paths and the 4 forms of birth, I may at times have risen in revolt, committed theft, or broken into others' homes at night, and on account of these offenses, been convicted by the ruler and condemned to exile or death. This time, however, it is because I am so firmly resolved to propagate the Lotus Sutra that people with evil karma have brought false charges against me, hence my exile. Surely this will work in my favor in future lifetimes. In this latter age, there cannot be anyone else who upholds the Lotus Sutra 24 hours of the day and night without making a deliberate effort to do so. Let me say that again. In this latter age, there cannot be anyone else who upholds the Lotus Sutra 24 hours of the day and night without making a deliberate effort to do so. So that should be your mindset of having the same mind as Nichiren. You're endeavoring this in the same manner that he did, with that kind of conviction. Not every once in a while, not when it's convenient, not when somebody tells or reminds you to. You should be committed in faith to being the Buddha in your present form as the ultimate purpose of why you were born. Period. Somebody has to live according to the teaching. Somebody has to be the example that it's not just this guy Nichiren that can do this, or Daisaku Ikeda. Common people like us, we must live this way too. This should be the appropriate way of thought for our lives. There is one thing for which I am most grateful. While transmigrating in the 6 paths for the duration of countless kalpas, I may have encountered a number of sovereigns and become their favorite minister or regent. If so, I must have been granted fiefs and accorded treasures and stipends. Never once, however, did I encounter a sovereign in whose country the Lotus Sutra had spread so that I could hear its name, practice it, and on that very account be slandered by other people and have the ruler send me into exile. In other words, encounter the difficulties that validate that I'm practicing the correct teaching. I could have never reached it. In other words, he's saying all those cool things, like being the sovereign's favorite minister, getting stipends, getting all that, none of that equals the debt or the treasure of embracing the law. The Lotus Sutra states, as for this Lotus Sutra, throughout immeasurable numbers of lands, one cannot even hear its name, much less be able to see it, accept and embrace, read and recite it. We should all be so grateful. Thus, those people who slandered me and the ruler who had me banished are the very persons to whom I owe the most profound debt of gratitude. It's because of them that I'm able to be the Buddha in my present form. One who studies the teachings of Buddhism must not fail to repay the 4 debts of gratitude. According to the contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra, the first of the 4 debts is that owed to all living beings. Were it not for them, so our enemies as well as our mentors, were it not for them, one would find it impossible to make a vow to save innumerable living beings, right? So without all those people slandering us, they're part of the human beings that are necessary for us to make the vow to save all those living beings. Moreover, But for the evil people who persecute bodhisattvas, how could those bodhisattvas increase their merit? The second of the 4 debts is that owed to one's father and mother. To be born into the 6 paths, one must have parents. If one is born into the family of a murderer, a thief, a violator of the rules of proper conduct, or a slanderer of the law, even though one may not commit these offenses oneself, one in effect forms the same karma as those who do. As for my parents in this lifetime, however, they not only gave me birth, but made me a believer in the Lotus Sutra. They sent me to Seichoji. They put me on the path that led me to ultimately encounter the sutra. Thus I owe my present father and mother a debt far greater than I would had I been born into the family of Brahma, Shakra, one of the 4 heavenly kings, or a wheel-turning king, and so inherited the 3-fold world or the 4 continents, and been revered by the 4 kinds of believers in the world of human and heavenly beings. Okay, you with me? Human and heavenly beings is only 5 and 6 out of 10, right? The third is the debt owed to one's sovereign. It is thanks to one's sovereign that one can warm one's body in the 3 kinds of heavenly light and sustain one's life with the 5 kinds of grain that grow on earth. Moreover, in this lifetime, I have taken faith in the Lotus Sutra, and I encountered a ruler who will enable me to free myself in my present existence from the sufferings of birth and death. I'll be able to enter the realm of birth and death in the realm of Buddhahood. I'll never, ever, ever, ever fail to be a Buddha in each subsequent lifetime after this one. Thus, how can I dwell on insignificant harm that he has done to me and overlook my debt to him? Whoa, that's compassion and wisdom. The fourth is the debt owed to the 3 treasures. When the thus come one Shakyamuni was engaged in bodhisattva practices for countless kalpas, he gathered all of the good fortune and virtue he had gained thereby, divided it into 64 parts, and took on their merit. Of these 64, he reserved only 1 part for himself. The remaining 63 parts he left behind in this world, making a vow as follows: there will be an age when the 5 impurities will become rampant, erroneous teachings will flourish, and slanderers will fill the land, like now. At that time, because of the innumerable benevolent guardian deities will be unable to taste the flavor of the law, their majesty and strength will diminish. The sun and moon will lose their brightness. The heavenly dragons will not send down rain, and the heavenly deities will decrease the fertility of the soil. The roots and stalks, branches and leaves, flower and fruit will all lose their medicinal properties as well as the 7 flavors. Even those who became kings because they had observed the 10 good precepts in previous lifetimes will grow in greed, anger, and foolishness. The people will cease to be dutiful to their parents, and the 6 kinds of relatives will fall into disaccord. At such a time, my disciples will consist of unlearned people without precepts, like us. For this reason, even though they shave their heads, they will be forsaken by at that time, my disciples will consist of unlearned people without precepts. For this reason, even though they shave their heads, they will be forsaken by the tutelary deities and left without any means of subsistence. It is in order to sustain these monks and nuns that I now leave these 63 parts behind. That's what the Buddha was saying. Moreover, as for the benefits that the Buddha had attained as a result of his practices, he divided them into 3 parts, of which he himself made use of only 2. For this reason, although he was to have lived in this world until the age of 120, he passed away after 80 years, bequeathing the remaining 40 years of his lifespan to us. And President Ikeda will get into that analogy. Even if we should gather all the water of the 4 great oceans to wet inkstones, burn all the trees and plants to make ink sticks, collect the hairs of all the beasts for writing brushes, employ all the surfaces in the world and the 10 directions for paper, and with these set down expressions of gratitude, how could we possibly repay our debt to the Buddha? Concerning the debt owed to the law is the teacher of all Buddhas. It is because of the law that the Buddhas are worthy of respect. Therefore, those who wish to repay their debt to the Buddha must first repay the debt they owe to the law. As for the debt owed to the Buddhist order, both the treasure of the Buddha and the treasure of the law are invariably perpetuated by the order. To illustrate, without firewood, this teaching, there can be no fire. And if there is no earth, trees and plants cannot grow. Likewise, even though Buddhism existed, without the members of the order who studied it and passed it on, it would never have been transmitted throughout the 2,000 years of the former and the middle days into the latter day of the law. Accordingly, the Great Collection Sutra states, suppose that in the last of the 500-year periods, there should be someone who harasses unlearned monks without precepts by accusing them of some offense. You should know that this person is extinguishing the great torch of Buddhism. Therefore, the debt we owe to the order is difficult to recompense. And do you understand what he just said in those last couple sentences? He's now qualifying why those people that are persecuting him. Remember, he had two things that he was concerned about, and the second one was, oh my God, the slander that these people that are persecuting me are creating. This is what he's talking about. According to the Great Collection Sutra, suppose that in the last 500, suppose that in the last of the 500-year periods, which is when he made his advent, all right, there should be someone who harasses unlearned monks, which he just described as going on with himself now, without precepts. He just is describing himself just now by accusing them of some offense, which he just said, they accuse me of things I've not done. You should know that this person, that slanderous person that's persecuting Nichiren, is extinguishing the great torch of Buddhism. Therefore, the debt we owe to the order is difficult to recompense. Thus, it is imperative. So he's saying, all of us are so important, we can't put a price on that treasure. Thus, it is imperative that one repay one's debt of gratitude to the three treasures. In ancient times, there were sages such as the boy Snow Mountains, Bodhisattva Ever Wailing, Bodhisattva Medicine King, and King Universal Brightness, all of whom offered their lives in order to make such repayment. The first offered his body as food to a demon, the second sold his own blood and marrow, the third burned his arms, and the fourth was ready to part with his head. Ordinary people in this latter age, however, though receiving the benefits of the three treasures, completely neglect to repay them. How then can they attain the Buddha way? The contemplation on the mind ground and the Brahmanet Sutra and other sutras state that those who study Buddhism and receive the precepts of perfect and immediate enlightenment must repay the four debts of gratitude without fail. That pertains to us. I am but an ignorant, ordinary person made of flesh and blood. I have not rid myself of even a fraction of the three categories of illusion. Yet on account of the Lotus Sutra, I have been reviled, slandered, attacked with swords and staves, and sent into exile. In light of these persecutions, I believe I may be likened to the great sages who burned their arms, crushed their marrow, or did not begrudge being beheaded. This is what I mean. This is what I mean by immense joy. The second of the two important matters is that I feel intense grief. The fourth volume of the Lotus Sutra states, if there should be an evil person who, his mind destitute of goodness, should for the space of a kalpa appear in the presence of the Buddha and constantly curse and revile the Buddha, that person's offense would still be rather light. But if there were a person who spoke only one evil word to curse or defame the laypersons or monks or nuns who read and recite the Lotus Sutra, then his offense would be very grave. When I read this and similar passages, my belief is aroused, sweat breaks out from my body, and tears fall from my eyes like rain. I grieve that by being born in this country, I have caused so many of its people to create the worst karma possible in a lifetime. Those who beat and struck Bodhisattva, never disparaging, came to repent of it while they were still alive. Yet, even so, their offenses were so difficult to expiate that they fell into the Avicii hell and remained there for 1,000 kalpas. But those who have done me harm have not yet repented of it, even in the slightest. Describing the karmic retribution that such people must receive, the Great Collection Sutra states, the Buddha asked, if there should be a person who draws blood from the bodies of 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 Buddhas, in your thinking, how is it? Will he have committed a grave offense or not? The great King Brahma replied, if a person causes the body of even a single Buddha to bleed, he will have committed an offense so serious that he will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. His offense will be unfathomably grave, and he will have to remain in the great Avicii hell for so many kalpas that their number cannot be calculated, even by means of counting sticks. Graver still is the offense a person would commit by causing the bodies of 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas to bleed. No one could possibly explain in full extent that person's offense or its karmic retribution. No one, that is, except the thus come one himself. The Buddha said, the great King Brahma, suppose there should be a person who, for my sake, takes the tonsure, wears a surplice, even though he may not at any time even though he has not at any time received the precepts and therefore observes none, if someone harasses him, abuses him, or strikes him with a staff, then that persecutor's offense will be even greater than that of injuring 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas. So, feel sorry for people that give you shit. Nichiren, the 16th day of the first month of the second year of Kocho, 1262, the cyclical sign of Mizuno Inu. Yeah. Okay. And we got just enough time to get started on the lecture.
Yes.
Everybody's clear? That was pretty cool, I thought. I love that verse. Okay, 4 debts of gratitude. I won't read the first gray boxes because we'll get to them as we go along in the lecture. So we'll start on page 100. Lecture. The road of life is progressive, declared the Chinese writer Lu Xun. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Lu Xun. No matter what darkness may dam the stream of thought, what misfortunes may assail society, what crimes may violate morality, humankind's aspirations for perfection will always advance, trampling over these iron spikes. We have the power to move forward, to advance. Life's road of progress, self-improvement, and mission laid on a solid commitment to truth and justice cannot be impeded by any obstacle. Striving for the happiness of both ourselves and others. Continuing on page 100, first column. The Russian author Leo Tolstoy wrote, the life of the human being is aspiration toward human good, and aspiration toward human good is human life. That which propels us in the direction of human good is, in Nichiren Buddhist terms, the life force of Buddhahood, which brings about happiness of both ourselves and others. How do we tap into this innate power and continue advancing limitlessly to create a new age? The most fundamental way is to live with a sense of appreciation and gratitude. More specifically, it is to recognize and strive to repay our debts of gratitude. When we live with a sense of gratitude, we will never be deadlocked, being resolved to show our appreciation to our parents, our teachers, and everyone who has helped us become the person we are today can serve as a driving force for self-improvement. And that's exactly what I was talking about, what occurred to me during that hour last Wednesday. Not wishing to betray the trust of those who have fostered us can keep us on the right path throughout life. That's the mentor-disciple relationship. And when we face difficulties, thinking of all those who have helped us in some way can rouse in our hearts a renewed fighting spirit. Gratitude is a source of fundamental human strength. Pardon me. Those who have no gratitude, on the other hand, lead a dark and cheerless life because they destroy the very fabric that makes them human. So when you see people like that, understand what the root cause of why they are that way is that way. Mm-hmm. All right? Have mercy for them, my goodness. It's the lack of understanding of correct teaching that makes them that way. It's not necessarily because they're evil people. They're ignorant. That's why we can have compassion for them rather than look down or despise them. You dig? Mm-hmm. All right? This is why Nichiren writes, one who studies the teachings of Buddhism must not fail to repay the 4 debts of gratitude. In many writings, he stresses that repaying debts of gratitude is the essential way of life of a Buddhist practitioner. My mentor, Second Soka Gakkai President Josei Toda, once remarked, when we look at today's world, there are very few people on the correct path of knowing and repaying one's debts of gratitude. As a consequence, society is afflicted with troubles, and people go about their lives filled with bitterness and resentment. If we want to change this, we must propagate the mystic law, the single vehicle for attaining Buddhahood, and encourage people everywhere to base their lives on it. A true teacher in Buddhism is one who strives to guide everyone to this truly human path of appreciation and gratitude. It falls to us to apprehend who the genuine teachers of Buddhism are, teachers in whom we can place our full trust, and to practice as they instruct and share their teachings with as many others as possible. This year, 2011, the year that this lecture series, the Teachings for Victory, was published, marks the 750th anniversary of Nichiren's Izu exile. In this chapter, let us examine portions of the 4 debts of gratitude, which was composed during that exile, and study how we can lead a life of gratitude. I'll continue. The joy of reading the Lotus Sutra with one's life. Concerning my present exile at Izu, there are 2 important matters that I must mention. One is that I feel immense joy. The 4 debts of gratitude dated January 16, 1262 was sent from Izu to a lay follower named Kuro Yoshitaka, who lived in Tojo village in Nagasa district, Awa province. Nichiren was exiled to Izu in 1261. The year after, he submitted his treatise on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, the Rishon Kokoran, to Hojo Tokiyori as a remonstrance to the country's rulers. In other words, repercussions ensued because he began his full-fledged struggle to establish the correct teaching and bring peace to the land by denouncing what he called the one evil. The one evil that was causing suffering. The Izu exile was the first time the Kamakura military government openly persecuted him. Though the exact sequence of events is unclear, the exile is believed to have been instigated by the powerful retired co-signer or co-regent Hojo Shigetoki and his heir, the reigning regent Hoji Nakatoki. The Izu exile lasted about 2 years, from May 1261, when Nichiren was taken to Ito in Izu province, to February 1263. The letter we are studying here gained its title from the fact that Nichiren discusses the 4 debts of gratitude in its second half. Though written in the midst of the Izu exile, every word and phrase of the 4 debts of gratitude brims with Nichiren's great joy at being able to encounter this persecution, which enables him to read the Lotus Sutra with his life. The letter begins with confident words that attest to the Daishonen's unshakable conviction in the correctness of his actions. Concerning my present exile, there are 2 important matters that I must mention. One is that I feel immense joy. And near the letter's end, he states, the second of the 2 important matters is that I feel intense grief. He felt a tremendous sense of joy at being able to read the Lotus Sutra with his life, even risking even death. But at the same time, he was deeply grieved by the fact that those who persecuted him were creating negative karma through their actions. His words indicate a state of mind that seems quite extraordinary, coming from someone in the dire situation of exile in 13th century Japan. Allow me now to briefly summarize these two important matters based on relevant passages in this letter. With regard to the first important matter of immense joy, the circumstances in which Nichiren found himself were harsh in the extreme, the exact opposite of what would normally be described as inspiring joy. He begins by explaining that this world in which we dwell is known as the Sahe world, or the world of endurance, where one has no other option but to endure sufferings. It is also inhabited by people steeped in evil karma, who have been rejected from the pure lands of the 10 directions. The devil king of the 6th heaven, he says, is hard at work to prevent the people of this world from attaining enlightenment. In the latter day of the law, moreover, the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness intensify in people's lives, and anyone who dares to spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra will inevitably face abuse and persecution. Will inevitably. That means without a doubt it will come. Let me say that again. Intensify in people's lives. And anyone, that includes all of us, who dares to spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra will inevitably face abuse and persecution from arrogant individuals who have been possessed by evil demons. Nichiren underwent persecution in the form of exile, just as predicted in the Lotus Sutra, an exile that resulted from his efforts to lead all people in the evil age of the latter day of the law to enlightenment. It is in this respect that he read the Lotus Sutra with his life, prompting him to exclaim elsewhere in this letter, "For anyone born human, what greater joy could there be?" To read the Lotus Sutra with our lives means to actualize the Buddha's intent. It means to fulfill our vow for Kosen Rufu as bodhisattvas of the earth. That is, to carry out the noble mission of leading all people to enlightenment in the evil age after the Buddha's passing, to achieve Kosen Rufu, to strive to contribute toward achieving Kosen Rufu. When we read the Lotus Sutra with our lives, we can open the way for Kosen Rufu into the eternal future. When we dedicate our lives to the great vow of the Buddha for the happiness of all people, we can attain a state of being brimming with the boundless joy of the law, a state of unsurpassed happiness, regardless of the circumstance we're facing. Nichiren then goes on to list one more reason for his immense joy, being able to repay debts of gratitude, the heart of Buddha's practice. He expresses his delight at having been given an opportunity to do so. In this letter, therefore, he writes of the joy he derives from reading the Lotus Sutra with his life and from selflessly dedicating his life to propagating the correct teaching of Buddhism, thereby repaying his debts of gratitude. His lofty and indomitable state of life can inspire us to see the hardships and obstacles we personally encounter as ideal opportunities for elevating our life condition. Now, how does that occur, though? It's those things that put us in front of the Gohonzon, chanting Daimoku, beseeching, change. That's the point. His lofty and dominant state of life can inspire us to see the hardships and obstacles we personally encounter as ideal opportunities for elevating our life condition. I personally, when I'm being persecuted or I have a huge obstacle, my mentors taught me to, first thing you do is you thank the Gohonzon. As opposite as that may seem logically, the first thing you do is you try to rouse the wisdom to perceive your life in the correct manner. Not as some little shit common mortal that's being persecuted or got some big problem, how can I overcome this? But as someone that perceives and understands why the teaching says that's going to happen to me and why I don't have to worry about kicking its ass. So actually, it's going to let me kick its ass and advance myself toward that goal of a Buddhahood in my present form, right? So I should always say thank you in my heart, in my mind, and mean it. If it's just for the sake of saying those words, it doesn't work. But when you can chant Daimoku before you start getting into everything else, to establish your mind as the same mind as Nichiren, which is what that process actually is, to perceive life the way he perceived it, the way his teaching tells us to perceive it, we can then have those difficulties that are bumming us out and making us on shitsu to the Gohanzan. We start complaining about people. We start slandering people even while we're chanting to the Gohanzan. You know you've done it, right?
Yeah, it's
So get rid of that part first by saying, I know why this is happening. It's because of me. And it's because of what I'm doing. And so, thank you very much. Now I can chant like a Buddha to the Gohanzan. Do you understand? Really works. Really works. His lofty and indomitable state of life can inspire us to see the hardships and obstacles we personally encounter as ideal opportunities for elevating our life condition. Through his own example, he demonstrated that facing difficulties with courage can fill our life with boundless joy. We can reflect that this letter was written while the Daishonin was living in exile. When we reflect that this letter was written while the Daishonin was living in exile, it becomes all the more moving. As I have said, Kudo Yoshitaka, the letter's recipient, lived in Tojo village in Awa province. The village steward, Tojo Kagenobu, we know he was a bad dude, was extremely hostile toward Nichiren and brought heavy pressure to bear on his followers in the area. He was behind that attack where this guy ultimately was killed. Aware of the challenging situation, Nichiren wrote Kudo this letter from Izu, communicating his own invincible spirit in the midst of adversity, along with the message, I am here, so have courage. Carry on my struggle for the sake of the law. Toward the end of this letter, Nichiren turns his attention to the second important matter, namely his immense grief. He says that in light of the principle of the Lotus Sutra, he feels great sorrow that many people are slandering the Lotus Sutra and creating negative karma by persecuting him for his efforts to propagate the mystic law. But Buddhism also teaches the benefit arising from having a reverse relationship with the Lotus Sutra. What is that?
Poison drum.
Poison drum, right. So in other words, no matter what the reaction of the people that we encourage to chant is, even if they reject what we say, we have in that process awakened them from being a Buddha in theory to having heard the name and the words of the truth. Do you understand? So that's what he's talking about here. But Buddhism also teaches the benefit of so that they will always hear the name and the words of the truth in every lifetime until they progress to 3 and to 4 and all the way to 6 supreme perfect enlightenment. But Buddhism also teaches the benefit arising from having a reverse relationship with the Lotus Sutra. There are 2 ways of forming a connection with the mystic law, one through acceptance and the other through rejection, the latter of which corresponds to the reverse relationship. Either way, the benefit of encountering the mystic law is engraved in the individual's life. Those who initially slander the Lotus Sutra will experience negative consequences per the workings of cause and effect, but in the end, they are certain to attain enlightenment through the power of the mystic law. Yes. In this letter, Nichiren's grief is not for his own predicament, rather expresses his infinite compassion imbued with a powerful resolve to help even his detractors and persecutors attain enlightenment. Mark. Nichiren felt the same when he was exiled to Sado. He states, I pray that before anything else I can guide and lead the ruler and those others who persecuted me, wanting to no matter what help the rulers who persecuted him. This displays the compassionate philosophy and action of Buddhism to save any kind of person. Any kind of person. He made this deck because we're supposed to save all people, right? So it can't be all the good people. He made this declaration in exile in the midst of persecution. Nichiren's pronouncement of immense joy and immense grief are declarations drawing attention to the limitless power and potential that reside within the human being. I'll stop there because we're at time. I'm probably going to reread a little bit of this again next week. I'm sorry I read so fast at the end. But it's a great go show, right?
Yes.
Got out? Okay, good. Well, see you next week.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.